There's a level of calmness in chaos that makes people physically back away from you. And today, you'll discover exactly how to reach it. Have you ever seen that person who stays completely still while everything around them is burning? The person who gets hit with crisis after crisis and their voice never cracks. Who watches their world collapse and their face shows absolutely nothing? While everyone else is screaming, they're silent. While everyone else is running in panic, they're standing perfectly still. And you know what people say about them? There's something wrong with them. That's not normal. They're either dead inside or they're dangerous. There's an ancient practice created by samurai warriors in feudal Japan that produces exactly this kind of unsettling composure. They called it heijoshin. Ordinary mind in extraordinary circumstances. And once you understand how it works, chaos will never control you again. But there's a catch. This system isn't for everyone. It requires you to rewire your nervous system in a way most people will never accept. But before I show you how it works, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and comment below the chaos you're facing right now. This helps me understand what you need and shows me you're serious about transformation. Let's begin. The story I'm about to tell you happened to a man named Marcus. He was 29, emergency room nurse at a major hospital. He'd chosen this job because he wanted to help people. But in the span of one 12-hour shift, his entire understanding of himself collapsed. Saturday night, 11:00 p.m., 3 gunshot victims arrived simultaneously. A car accident with 5 casualties came in 20 minutes later. A child having a seizure, an elderly man coding, a woman screaming that her husband wasn't breathing, 15 critical patients, 4 nurses, 1 doctor stuck in surgery. Marcus froze. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't start an IV. His mind went blank. He forgot basic procedures he'd done 1,000 times. His supervisor had to physically move him out of the way. By 2:00 a.m., the chaos had settled. 3 patients had died. Marcus sat in the break room staring at his hands. His supervisor sat down next to him. "You panicked. In this job, panic kills people." Marcus quit 2 weeks later. Not because he didn't care, because chaos had revealed something he couldn't face. When pressure hit maximum levels, he broke. Until the day he discovered why samurai could make life-or-death decisions while arrows flew past their heads. And no, it's not courage. It's something much more systematic and much more trainable. In 1905, Admiral Togo Heihachiro stood on the bridge of his flagship as the Russian Baltic Fleet approached Japanese waters. 38 warships, the largest naval force ever sent to Asia. Japan's survival as an independent nation depended entirely on the battle that was about to happen. Togo's officers were running across the deck, shouting coordinates, calculating firing solutions. Panic was spreading through the command staff. One officer burst onto the bridge. "Admiral, the enemy fleet has been sighted 20 kilometers southeast. They outnumber us in heavy battleships." Togo was sitting in a chair, reading a book. He closed the book slowly, stood up, walked to the railing, and said in a voice that sounded like he was ordering tea, "Signal the fleet. We will engage the enemy in column formation." His second-in-command stared at him. "Admiral, column formation exposes our entire fleet to broadside fire. We'll be defenseless for 15 minutes while we turn." Togo nodded. "Yes, signal the fleet." Every officer on that bridge thought this decision would kill them all. They were about to turn perpendicular to an enemy fleet that had been preparing for this fight for 8 months. The Russian commanders saw the Japanese fleet turning. They thought It was a mistake. They started firing, confident that the battle was already won. But something happened that none of them expected. The Japanese gunners were calm. Their breathing was controlled. Their hands were steady because their admiral's composure had transferred to every man on every ship. The Russian gunners were excited, adrenaline flooded, hands shaking with anticipation. They fired too early, adjusted too quickly, wasted ammunition on empty water. By the time the Japanese fleet completed its turn and opened fire, the battle was already decided. Japan sank 21 Russian warships that day. The Russian Empire's naval power was destroyed in 8 hours, and it started with one man who read a book while his nation's survival hung in the balance. This is Heijoshin. Ordinary mind in extraordinary circumstances. It doesn't mean you don't feel the pressure. It means pressure doesn't change your behavior. Togo wasn't braver than his officers. He had just trained his nervous system to recognize chaos as background noise rather than a crisis signal. Marcus didn't know any of this. He was avoiding the ER entirely, working in a quiet clinic. No emergencies, no chaos, no pressure. He thought he was protecting himself. He was actually making himself weaker, because the only way to master chaos is to systematically expose yourself to it. And it starts with something that sounds completely insane. When Marcus first learned about the samurai practice of crisis rehearsal, he thought it was psychological torture. You want me to spend 15 minutes every morning imagining everything going wrong? That's going to make my anxiety worse, not better. But he was desperate. His clinic job paid half what the ER did. His savings were disappearing. He needed to go back. But the thought of facing chaos again made his chest tighten. So he tried it. Day 1, 5:30 a.m. He sat on his apartment floor and closed his eyes. He imagined walking into the ER, multiple traumas arriving, blood everywhere, patients screaming, doctors yelling for equipment, his hands shaking, his mind going blank. 30 seconds in, his heart was pounding at 120 beats per minute. He could feel sweat on his palms. He opened his eyes, gasping, "This is making it worse." But here's what Marcus didn't understand yet. His body was already experiencing these scenarios randomly throughout the day. Every time he thought about going back to the ER, his nervous system triggered a panic response. The difference? When it happened randomly, he had no control. When he did it intentionally at 5:30 a.m., he was in charge. In 1561, Takeda Shingen, one of the most powerful warlords in Japan, had a daily ritual before battles. He would sit alone in his tent and vividly imagine every way the battle could go wrong. His army routed, his generals killed, his castle burned, his family executed, total defeat. He did this for 1 hour every morning before major campaigns. His generals thought he was preparing for failure. He was actually preparing his nervous system. By the time real chaos arrived, his body had already lived through the worst possible version thousands of times. A neuroscientist at Stanford, who has studied anxiety exposure therapy for 19 years, discovered that controlled, repeated exposure to imagined catastrophe reduces the amygdala's stress response by up to 47% within 4 weeks. Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, learns to categorize the scenario as familiar rather than novel threat. Familiar threats don't trigger panic. Novel threats do. Marcus committed to 15 minutes every morning. Same time, same practice. Day 3. Still horrible. His breath was shallow. His muscles were tense. Day 7. Something shifted. Halfway through imagining a patient dying while he worked on them, He noticed his heart rate wasn't spiking as hard. The panic felt more distant. Day 14. He could run through the entire nightmare scenario. Multiple traumas, equipment failures, patient deaths, and his hands stayed still. Week 4. His body had learned. The worst-case scenario in his mind no longer triggered his survival response. The ER chaos hadn't changed, but his internal reaction had completely transformed. But crisis rehearsal alone wasn't enough. Because even with a calm body, his mind was still trying to solve every problem simultaneously. That's when he discovered the second principle of Heijoshin, and this one required him to accept something that felt completely wrong. Here's the lie that destroyed Marcus in the ER. I need to handle everything at once. When chaos hit, his mind would try to track 15 patients simultaneously. Where's the gunshot victim? What's the status of the car accident patient? Is the seizure controlled? What's that alarm? His attention was divided into 15 pieces, which meant he was fully present for none of them. In 1570, Date Masamune, known as the One-Eyed Dragon of Oshu, was defending his castle against a siege. 3 armies were attacking from different directions simultaneously. His generals were running to him with updates every 5 minutes. "My lord, the northern wall is failing." "My lord, they're setting fire to the eastern gate." "My lord, our water supply is being poisoned." Date Masamune held up one hand, stopped all of them, and said, "I will address the northern wall. No one speaks to me about anything else for the next hour. If the eastern gate burns, it burns. If we lose water, we lose water. Right now, there is only the northern wall." He went to the northern wall, organized the defense, stabilized that section, then returned. "Now tell me about the eastern gate. One problem at a time. Total focus on each. No divided attention." His castle held for 16 days until reinforcements arrived. Military historians say if he'd tried to manage all 3 crises simultaneously, the castle would have fallen in 3 days. This is the principle of Ichigyo Zamai. Single-action concentration. When you're in the middle of chaos, you don't multitask, you sequence. A cognitive psychologist at MIT who has studied decision-making under pressure for 14 years found that when people face multiple simultaneous crises, attempting to address all of them reduces effectiveness by 71%. Your prefrontal cortex literally cannot process multiple complex problems at the same time. Marcus rewired his approach completely. When he returned to the ER after his 90-day training, he walked into the same chaos. Multiple traumas, limited staff, overwhelming pressure. Old Marcus would have frozen, trying to assess everything at once. New Marcus walked to the closest critical patient, blocked out everything else, stabilized that one person. Then moved to the next. A doctor shouted, "Marcus, I need you over here." Marcus didn't even look up. 60 seconds. He finished his current IV line, secured it properly, checked the flow, then moved to the next patient. His supervisor watched him work and later asked, "What changed?" "You're moving slower, but you're getting more done." Marcus replied, "I'm not moving slower. I'm just not moving in 15 directions at once." But single focus only worked when his environment cooperated. And chaos doesn't cooperate. That's where the third principle became critical. And this one required him to do something that made everyone around him uncomfortable. Even with crisis rehearsal and single-point focus, Marcus was still getting derailed. Not by the patients, by the distractions, other nurses asking questions, doctors wanting updates, administrators needing paperwork, family members demanding information, Every interruption reset his nervous system. Even a 5-second question pulled him out of his focused state for 3 minutes afterward. In samurai training halls, there was a concept called keikai, sacred space. When a warrior entered the training ground, he crossed a physical threshold. On one side, the regular world existed. On the other side, only practice existed. No one could interrupt him. No one could speak to him. The boundary was absolute. If someone broke keikai, they were removed from the dojo permanently. Admiral Togo applied this on his flagship. During battle, he established command silence around himself. Only his second-in-command could speak to him. Everyone else had to pass information through a chain. Officers thought this would slow down communication. It actually accelerated decision-making because Togo's mind stayed completely clear. Marcus created his own keikai in the ER. When he was working on a critical patient, he told everyone around him, "Boundary mode. Do not speak to me unless someone is dying." The first time he said this, a doctor was offended. "Excuse me?" Marcus looked up calmly. "Is someone dying right now who I'm not already treating?" "No, but I need—" "Then wait." He went back to his patient, finished the procedure, then addressed the doctor. His co-workers thought he was being rude. His supervisor thought he was being arrogant. Then they noticed something. Marcus's error rate had dropped to almost 0. His efficiency had increased. His calmness was affecting the entire section of the ER he worked in. A researcher at Yale who has studied workplace performance for 17 years found that medical professionals who establish uninterruptible blocks during critical procedures have 84% fewer mistakes than those who remain constantly available. But here's what surprised Marcus. The first 2 weeks, his protective boundary felt selfish, like he was prioritizing his state over others' needs. By week 4, he realized something. His protected focus made him more effective. Patients got better care. Decisions were sharper. The entire ER functioned better when he maintained his boundary. Protection of your mental state isn't selfish. It's the only way you can actually help people in chaos. Day 40. 5 trauma patients arrived in 10 minutes. Old Marcus would have collapsed under that pressure. New Marcus activated boundary mode. 1 patient at a time, no interruptions, total focus. He moved through all 5 with mechanical precision, no panic, no errors, no wasted movement. When it was over, his heart rate was 68 beats per minute, the same as when he was reading at home. His nervous system had learned. Chaos was just another shift. But even with all of this, there was one obstacle he hadn't solved, the question that breaks most people's composure. What do I do when the chaos is so extreme that all my protocols fail? Week 7, the scenario Marcus had rehearsed 1,000 times, actually happened. Mass casualty event, bus accident. 14 patients arrived within 5 minutes. 2 were DOA. 4 were coding. The rest were critical. Every protocol said call for additional staff, but it was 3 a.m. No one was available for at least 20 minutes. Old Marcus would have panicked, tried to save everyone, and lost most of them. New Marcus opened a mental document he'd created in week 3. His crisis overrides protocol. It looked like this: if mass casualty, plus insufficient staff, then triage immediately. Black tag, deceased. Red tag, immediate. Yellow tag, urgent. Green tag, stable. Address only. Red tags first. Accept that. Yellow tags may become red tags. Do not attempt to save everyone. 1 patient at a time in order of survivability. If multiple patients coding simultaneously. Then choose the one with highest survival probability. Let the others go. no hesitation. If family members interfering, then security removes them immediately. No explanations during crisis address after stabilization. Every possible nightmare scenario had a predetermined response, not perfect responses. Survival responses. In 1584, Date Masamune was ambushed during a peace negotiation. 15 assassins attacked him simultaneously in a small room. His bodyguards started to react emotionally. Some ran, some froze, some attacked wildly. Date Masamune had drilled his response to ambush scenarios 500 times. His body executed the protocol automatically. Back to wall, draw sword, defend only, don't chase attackers, wait for opening. He killed 3 attackers, the rest retreated. He survived with minor wounds. His retainers asked later, "My lord, how did you stay calm?" His answer, "I wasn't calm, I just wasn't thinking. Thinking during chaos gets you killed. Following protocol keeps you alive." A behavioral psychologist at Harvard, who has studied crisis decision-making for 21 years, found that people who pre-decide their actions during chaos maintain 68% better performance than those who figure it out in the moment. When catastrophe hits, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. Logic disappears. Emotion takes over. If you're trying to decide what to do during the crisis, you'll make the worst possible choice. But if the answer already exists in your nervous system, your body just executes. Marcus tagged patients mechanically. Red, red, yellow, black. Red, yellow, yellow. Red. He started with the first red tag, ignored everyone else, stabilized them, moved to the next red. By the time backup arrived, he'd saved 6 out of 8 critical patients. The 2 he lost were unsavable from the start. His supervisor reviewed the incident. "Marcus, you made the right call on every single patient. How?" Marcus replied, "I made the calls 3 months ago. Tonight, I just followed the protocol." That night, he went home and did his crisis rehearsal meditation, imagined even worse scenarios, prepared his nervous system for what might come next. Day 90. 3 months since he'd started training Heijoshin, he was no longer the same person. 3 months of systematic training. And Marcus had become someone his co-workers didn't recognize. A code blue was called, cardiac arrest. The patient was crashing. The room erupted in controlled chaos, nurses running, doctors shouting orders, equipment alarms screaming. Marcus walked in, moved to the patient, started compressions. His face showed nothing. His breathing didn't change. His voice stayed level. Epi administered. Continue compressions. Charge to 200. Another nurse was shaking, hands fumbling with the defibrillator. Marcus looked at her. His eyes were completely calm. She stopped shaking. The patient came back. Pulse restored. Crisis over. The attending physician pulled Marcus aside afterward. "You're different. I've seen you in codes before. You used to panic. Now it's like nothing bothers you. What changed?" Marcus didn't explain the system. He just said, "I practiced dying 1,000 times. Compared to that, a code blue is just another Tuesday." Over the next few weeks, people started noticing something unsettling about Marcus. During a particularly bad shift, everyone was stressed, snapping at each other, making mistakes. Marcus moved through it all with mechanical precision, no frustration, no visible emotion. Just execution. One nurse said to another, "There's something wrong with him. He's too calm. It's not normal." Perfect, because when your composure in chaos makes others uncomfortable, you've finally mastered Heijoshin. You're not trying to be normal. Normal people break under pressure. Normal people make emotional decisions. Normal people let chaos control them. You're not normal anymore. You're dangerous. Not because you'll hurt anyone, because your calmness makes others realize how fragile their own state is. The Heiyoshin system doesn't make you a better person. It makes you a different person. Someone who can watch everything burn and still think clearly. And when you reach that level, people will look at you and think you're hiding something, that you don't feel anything, that something's wrong with you. Let them think that. Let them think whatever they need to think to make sense of what they're witnessing. Because while they're drowning in their emotions, you're making decisions that will save lives. When people look at you with suspicion because your composure unsettles them, understand what's actually happening beneath the surface. They're not seeing you clearly. They're seeing a mirror reflection of their own inability to self-regulate. Your calmness isn't the problem. Their fundamental lack of emotional control is what creates the discomfort they're projecting onto you. And that creates profound cognitive dissonance in their minds. Their brain is frantically asking questions. How is this person staying calm when I'm falling apart? Are they not perceiving the same threat level I am? Are they in psychological denial? Are they dangerously suppressing emotions that will explode later? Or the question they fear most, do they possess capabilities I fundamentally lack? That last question is the one their ego cannot process directly. So their mind takes a defensive shortcut and decides something must be defective in you. You're too calm. That's not normal. That's not human. Perfect. Let them believe that. Because normal humans make catastrophic decisions from fear states. Normal humans allow their amygdala to completely hijack their prefrontal cortex during crisis. Normal humans say things in heated moments they'll regret for years. Make choices under pressure they'll have to painfully reverse later. Damage critical relationships they'll spend months trying to repair. You're not engaging in any of that destructive pattern anymore. Because while their entire nervous system is being controlled by ancient survival mechanisms designed for predator attacks, you're maintaining access to the part of your brain that can actually analyze complex problems and generate effective solutions. While they're biochemically drowning in stress hormones, cortisol spiking, adrenaline flooding, making reactive decisions that feel desperately urgent but accomplish absolutely nothing productive. You're operating from crystalline clarity. You're perceiving the situation as it objectively exists, not as fear distorts and magnifies it into catastrophe. And that clarity saves lives in the most literal sense possible. This isn't about not feeling fear. It's about functioning perfectly while fear is screaming. Let's establish absolute clarity on this critical point, because this is where most people completely misunderstand what Heiyoshin actually means. Heiyoshin does not make you fearless. It does not eliminate the emotion of fear from your psychological experience. It does not turn you into some kind of emotionless robot incapable of normal human responses. What it does is far more sophisticated and infinitely more useful. It makes you functional despite fear. It creates separation between feeling and action. It builds a gap between stimulus and response where conscious choice can exist. Admiral Togo absolutely felt fear when 38 Russian warships materialized on the horizon that morning in 1905. His cardiovascular system responded exactly as human physiology is designed to respond. His heart rate elevated. His adrenal glands released stress hormones into his bloodstream. His autonomic nervous system recognized the existential magnitude of the threat his nation faced. But, and this is the crucial distinction that separates masters from amateurs, that fear didn't control his hands. It didn't destabilize his voice. It didn't cloud his strategic judgment. It didn't cause him to make impulsive decisions he'd regret later. Fear was present in his system as pure information. This situation is dangerous. Increase alertness. Pay closer attention. But information doesn't get to make the command decisions. Training makes the command decisions. Protocol makes the command decisions. Years of systematic preparation make the command decisions. Dead Masamune felt genuine terror when 15 assassins explosively burst into that confined room with murder as their singular intention. His body instantaneously flooded with adrenaline. His pupils dilated to maximum width. Every muscle in his body tensed in preparation for lethal combat. But fear didn't make him freeze like a deer in lantern light. It didn't make him panic and flee blindly. It didn't make him flail his sword wildly in all directions, hoping blind luck would save him. Fear activated his sympathetic nervous system and sharpened his senses. Then his 500 systematic rehearsals took complete control. His body executed the predetermined survival protocol automatically, while his conscious awareness simply observed the process unfolding. Marcus felt visceral fear every single time he walked into a mass casualty situation in the emergency room. His chest tightened reflexively. His respiratory rate wanted desperately to accelerate into hyperventilation. His hands wanted to tremble uncontrollably, but 3 months of daily crisis rehearsal meditation had taught his nervous system something revolutionary. This biochemical feeling doesn't require behavioral action. This sensation is just neurochemistry. Cortisol and adrenaline performing their evolutionary function. They're attempting to help. They're just remarkably bad at helping in modern contexts. So, he learned to acknowledge the fear with detached awareness. Yes, I register your presence. Thank you for the threat alert. And then he proceeded according to protocol, regardless of what his emotions were broadcasting. The fear didn't vanish into thin air. It just permanently lost its authority to control his actions. This is the fundamental truth most people catastrophically misunderstand about courage. They believe courageous people don't experience fear. That's complete nonsense. Courageous people feel fear with exactly the same intensity as cowards do. The neurochemical experience is identical. The only difference, the sole distinguishing factor, is that courageous people have systematically trained themselves to function optimally anyway. Your body will always manufacture fear in genuinely dangerous situations. That's not optional. That's hardwired biology. 10,000 years of evolutionary pressure built that response specifically to keep your ancestors alive on the African savanna. But you can train what happens in the gap between fear arising and action occurring. You can construct psychological space where conscious choice lives. You can build a buffer zone where wisdom can operate. Fear arises as automatic biochemistry. You notice it as sensation. You don't obey it as command. That's mastery. That's Heijoshin. This isn't about avoiding chaos. It's about becoming unbreakable within it. The majority of human beings approach chaos with an avoidance-based life strategy. They organize their entire existence around preventing disorder from entering their controlled environment. They create elaborate systems and routines designed to maintain predictable order. They plan obsessively. They attempt to predict and control every possible variable. And when chaos inevitably arrives anyway, which it absolutely always does because chaos is the default state of reality, they psychologically collapse. because they've constructed their entire identity around maintaining order, and chaos ruthlessly destroys that identity. Heijoshin takes the diametrically opposite philosophical approach. It begins with this premise: chaos is inevitable. Disorder is the natural entropic state of the universe. Control is a comforting illusion. Therefore, instead of wasting energy trying to prevent chaos, become someone who can function optimally within chaos. Don't avoid the storm by hiding in your house. Become the mountain that doesn't move when the storm hits. Marcus used to call in sick when he heard the emergency room was experiencing particularly high patient volumes. He'd trade shifts with other nurses to deliberately avoid weekend nights when violent trauma cases statistically peaked. He was attempting to control his external environment to match his limited internal capacity for handling pressure. After his 90-day transformation, he began volunteering specifically for the worst shifts, not because he had developed some masochistic enjoyment of chaos, but because chaos became where he systematically tested his training. Chaos became where he proved to his nervous system that it could handle absolutely anything reality threw at it. You don't develop physical strength by exclusively lifting light weights. You don't build cardiovascular endurance by taking gentle walks. You don't develop psychological resilience by carefully avoiding every challenge that tests your limits. The samurai didn't only meditate in peaceful temple gardens surrounded by cherry blossoms, they deliberately meditated in violent storms, in freezing winter conditions, while physically exhausted, while acutely hungry, while sitting in meditation posture directly beside decomposing corpses on active battlefields. They intentionally placed themselves in environments specifically designed to challenge their composure to the maximum, because they understood something most people never discover. Your nervous system adapts to whatever conditions you consistently expose it to. If you consistently avoid chaos, your nervous system learns that chaos represents danger requiring escape. Your tolerance threshold progressively lowers. Eventually, even minor disorder feels completely overwhelming. If you consistently expose yourself to chaos while maintaining composure, your nervous system learns that chaos is manageable background noise. Your tolerance threshold systematically rises. Eventually, what used to overwhelm you becomes just another ordinary Tuesday. This explains why Marcus performed crisis rehearsal meditation every single morning for 90 consecutive days. He wasn't avoiding chaos in his imagination. He was training his body to recognize chaos as normal operating conditions. This isn't discipline. It's identity transformation, the death of your reactive self, the birth of your immovable self. Here's what the entire self-improvement industry catastrophically misunderstands. They discuss discipline as if it's merely a skill you gradually develop through effort. Just be more disciplined. Build better habits through willpower. Increase your self-control incrementally. That's not what Heijoshin represents at all. Heijoshin isn't about forcing yourself to behave differently through willpower. It's about becoming a fundamentally different person. Someone for whom calm in chaos isn't an achievement requiring effort. It's simply who they are at the identity level. When Marcus started his training, staying calm in the emergency room required enormous conscious effort every single shift. Every day was an exhausting battle against his nervous system's default programming. His body desperately wanted to panic. His mind wanted to scatter attention, and he had to consciously override those powerful impulses constantly. That's exhausting. That's not sustainable long term. But after 90 days of systematic practice, Something fundamental shifted at the neurological level. Staying calm wasn't something he did anymore through willpower. It was something he was at the identity level. His body didn't attempt to panic anymore. His mind didn't try to scatter anymore. Because his identity had undergone complete transformation. He wasn't a person trying really hard to stay calm in chaos. He had become a person who remains calm in chaos. That's not merely a semantic difference. That's a profound neurological difference with measurable brain activity changes. Your brain maintains a detailed model of who you are, your self-concept, your identity. And your brain works extraordinarily hard to make your automatic behavior match that internal model. If your self-concept remains, "I'm someone who panics under pressure," your brain will reliably find ways to make you panic under pressure. Because maintaining consistency with identity is more important to your brain than optimizing performance. But if your self-concept transforms into, "I'm someone who remains composed under pressure," your brain will automatically find ways to keep you composed. Not because you're forcing it through willpower, because that's who you are now at the deepest level. Admiral Togo didn't win the Battle of Tsushima because he had better ships. He won because his nervous system was trained for chaos. Let's examine this carefully, because most people completely miss the crucial point. The Russian Baltic Fleet possessed newer battleships with superior technology, more heavy artillery guns, thicker armor plating. By every material measure of naval power, they were the superior fighting force. But naval battles aren't won by equipment specifications alone. They're won by the human beings operating that equipment under extreme pressure. And when the battle began, the Russian sailors were operating from fear states. Their officers were making command decisions from panic. Their gunners were firing from hands flooded with adrenaline. The Japanese sailors were operating from systematic training. Their officers were making command decisions from predetermined protocols. Their gunners were firing from calm, controlled breathing. Same ocean, same weather conditions. Fundamentally different nervous systems. The Russians had superior ships, but inferior operators. Japan had inferior ships, but superior operators. The operators won. They always do.